Good evening from New York. This is Wednesday, July 13th, 482 days until the 2012 presidential election, and the day Rupert Murdoch's spying scandal washed up on our shores like so much flotsam, with the line of politicians suddenly wanting an investigation into an allegation that one of Murdoch's papers tried to hack into the phones of 9/11 victims forming on the right. My bet is, says Senate Commerce Committee Chair Jay Rockefeller in proposing his investigation, we'll find some criminal stuff. As I see it, says Republican Congressman Peter King, as he writes demanding an investigation by FBI Director Robert Mueller, I would expect more things to be coming out over the next several weeks. Senator Robert Menendez wants the Justice Department to do the inquiry. Senator Frank Lautenberg is suggesting that what Murdoch's men did just in England alone merits investigation by our Securities and Exchange Commission. The blood is in the water, and the sharks are bipartisan. Congressman King, regular on Murdoch's Fox News, indicating just how much blood there is in that water, also hinting at the Corrupt Practices Act, which prohibits American companies like Murdoch's from trying to bribe foreign officials, and hitting the 9/11 victims front. He told the website Politico, quote, as I see it, I would expect more things to be coming out over the next several weeks, and as we approach 9/11, the 10th anniversary, it's even going to get worse. Then there is Mr. Rockefeller of West Virginia. The reported allegations against News Corporation are very serious, indicate a pattern of illegal activity, and involve thousands of potential victims. It is important to ensure that no United States laws were broken and no United States citizens were victimized. Senator Lautenberg, the limited information already reported in this case raises serious questions about the legality of the conduct of News Corporation and its subsidiaries. Further investigation may reveal the current reports only scratch the surface of the problem at News Corporation. Needless to say, 9/11 families are also outraged at even a hint that their lost loved ones' phones might have been hacked, and the only evidence thus far is a hint, an unnamed source telling a rival London tabloid that News of the World reporters had tried to buy phone numbers of 9/11 victims in hopes of hacking into their voicemails. Sally Regenhard, who lost her 28-year-old firefighter son on September 11th, told Politico today, it's hard enough for people to deal with the 10th anniversary, and now this, it just adds more salt to the wounds. If it's true, then it is an egregious violation of decency and respect. Joining me now is John Dean, Countdown contributor, author of Conservatives Without Conscience, and, of course, White House counsel to President Richard Nixon. John, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
They certainly have volume, but do these calls for investigations have any breadth or width to them? Is there anything going on here?
Well, given the people who are calling for them, they certainly have some strength to them, because these are people who have the ability to actually initiate investigations or put pressure on investigative bodies to look into these things. So I say yes, they do.
Where is the most likely success to be found, even if it's just in terms of success being defined by whether or not there's actually an investigation? Is it criminal or financial or what, or some combination thereof?
Well, I suspect that the most likely place will be the SEC, and the staff is probably already making some preliminary looks at the accounting practices to see how they accounted for what were in effect bribes. That'll be one place. The Department of Justice may well be looking. They have been very strict in recent years on the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, where you cannot bribe in a foreign country if you're an American corporation and take advantage of the business you get from that bribe. And they've cracked down on that, and that's a very substantial and troublesome statute for these people, I would think. Those are, to me, the most prominent. The civil suits right now they're facing don't look very serious. They're nothing unusual. But the regulatory and potential criminal investigations are very serious.
So the way that this could be prosecuted here, even if there's nothing to the allegation of attempted hacking of 9/11 victims' phones, would be via this process you just described, the idea that an American company was trying to bribe foreign officials. Is that correct?
Right. It's actually a post-Watergate law called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is addressed at this very issue, that American corporations cannot pay bribes in foreign countries as a way of doing business. It's a statute that can only be brought against the people here in the United States. They don't have a jurisdiction over the people in Great Britain. But if there's a conspiracy to do that and the people in the United States were involved and aware of it, they're in a heap of trouble.
The ritual of politicians in Washington calling for investigations, it's one you know quite well. What does it mean when it suddenly goes bipartisan? The day started with 3 Democrats talking about this, and now Peter King, who's a very conservative Republican, and as I pointed out, a frequent guest on Fox News, basically in Murdoch's collection of politicians calling for this. What does that mean just in a symbolic sense?
Well, it's kind of a crack in the wall symbolically when somebody like Peter King, who is clearly, his credentials are very pro-Fox in their positions, and he's a frequent guest there, that he's taken the independent position to say, hey, this is something we need to look into. So he sort of signals to his peers, if you will, on the right, that maybe they should be taking that position.
Do you find it unusual that these politicians would be trying to read the tea leaves? I mean, again, Rockefeller said he guessed they'd find criminal stuff, which is, I guess, a legal term, criminal stuff. And King said that he expected more things to come out as we approach 9/11. It seems awfully unusual for them to be saying, to not being extremely small c conservative in terms of an investigation or a series of investigations that haven't even been authorized yet.
Well, Keith, these are all seasoned people who are talking about that. They've been around Washington a while. They've seen this pattern before. And given what they've seen so far, they have good reason to suspect there may be something more. We have seen not only smoke, but some flames, and they have good reason to have a hunch that there may be more here, and I think they're being proactive in addressing it.
Yes, and the politicians are rushing towards the flames with their weenies on their sticks, in the old camping terminology. Countdown contributor, author, columnist John Dean, as always. Great thanks, John.
Thank you, Keith.
The calls for investigations here were only one part of another jaw-dropping day of revelations and reversals for Murdoch in the UK. There today, former Prime Minister Gordon Brown told Parliament that law-breaking had occurred on an industrial scale at Murdoch's British newspapers. Brown described the media empire as something just short of the mafia.
And it was this nexus, this criminal media nexus, claiming to be on the side of the law, abiding citizens, but in fact standing side by side with criminals against our citizens.
His successor, the current Prime Minister David Cameron, who has been cozy with Murdoch, was also lashing out at him.
What has happened at this company is disgraceful. It's got to be addressed at every level, and they should stop thinking about mergers when they've got to sort out the mess they've created.
Cameron also announcing inquiries into the scandal would start as soon as possible to look both at wrongdoing by the press and the police who may have been bribed, and also to review Britain's press regulations more broadly. With lawmakers turning up the heat, Murdoch's $14 billion bid to take over the British satellite company B-Sky B is now officially a bust. A representative for News Corp explained the decision to withdraw the bid, saying it was simply too difficult in the current climate. Current climate there must be about 900 degrees. That's not the only bad business news for News Corp today. Members of the Bancroft family, which sold Murdoch the Wall Street Journal, saying today that they now have seller's remorse. Christopher Bancroft, one of several of the owners, each of whom today said they would have acted differently had they had a full picture of how Murdoch ran his newspapers. If I had known what I know now, I would have pushed harder. I probably would have held out. And within News Corp, there may be even more turmoil. His son, James, long thought to be heir apparent in this empire, may also be a casualty. The word used by Adweek Media editorial director and Murdoch biographer Michael Wolff was recast. Michael Wolff joins me now. Good evening to you yet again, sir.
Sir.
We'll get to this blender full of U.S. investigations in a moment, but these latest developments, James Murdoch in trouble?
Absolutely. I mean, James Murdoch, up until 10 days ago, was the incontrovertible heir to his father. I think he's out of the heir business now. I just think it can't happen. I think he has, again, this is fundamentally an issue of credibility. And when you lose it, when it goes, when it's stripped from you, when you've mishandled it, then all of the things which depend on your credibility collapse. And running a $30 billion public company with media outlets around the world without credibility is not possible.
His brother preceded him, perhaps, out of the company. He's already disassociated. There is some distance with Murdoch's daughter and Murdoch as well. Rupert, now 80 years old, as we keep pointing out, and assailed at all sides. This is beginning to sound like the end of King Lear, and we all know how that turned out. There is a certain tragedy quality to it.
Absolutely, and I think it is Shakespearean, operatic, however you want to define it. And I think this story is going to come out in ways that are, among other things, riveting. I mean, I think with James, and I think James is the pivotal player here, because the truth is Rupert Murdoch, the indomitable Rupert Murdoch, has been losing power, losing touch for the last number of years, and James has in a very interesting way kind of pulled away the people who have given Murdoch reasonable advice over the last decade or so. Peter Chernin, his lawyer who just was fired a couple of months ago, his PR guy, Gary Ginsberg, all adults. And all, when I was writing my book, they would refer to their jobs as managing Rupert. Or actually, Gary Ginsberg and Peter Chernin would say, managing the old man. And then James came in. James, remember, is 38 years old, really hasn't had any other jobs, doesn't, a college dropout. He's come in, he's taken over. He is his father's advisor, and I think he is the weak link here.
Give me an overview on this feeding frenzy in Washington today. Does it matter that the starting point is an anonymous source twice removed without any indication that there ever was any hacking of 9/11 victims' phones? I mean, once you hear of a letter to the FBI by somebody as far right as Peter King, plus all the support for investigations on the other side, are they worried about this here now?
Well, it's a great measure that you have something of in specific consequence, let's say, which is now causing something of a stampede. Everyone is deserting Murdoch. They smell it in the wind. I mean, you would be thick-headed if you didn't see what's happening here. And I think, and that's a sort of goes to how Murdoch has run his company and his fortunes. He has never made friends. He has just sort of subjugated people. It's a feudal environment, and suddenly the king or the despot, if you will, is vulnerable, and everybody says, damn it, I'm going in the other direction.
So we're not talking about King Lear. In fact, the correct analogy is probably the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, something.
It's closer to that, isn't it?
Yes, very much. Or Egypt.
Right.
I mean, he has held people in his thrall by his ability to reward and to punish. And if that goes away, he can neither reward, he can neither punish. Nothing left.
Michael Wolff of Adweek, the author of the Murdoch biography, The Man Who Owns the News. I've now run out of ways to say thank you, so just thanks.
And from me to you.
Late developments in the debt ceiling talks. Republicans claiming tonight that the president walked out of them this evening and announced, "Don't call my bluff." Whether or not that story is itself a bluff, next with Marcos Melitzis, here on Countdown.